Cool. Now we have 21 members in the session, looking good. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Quite honored to be asked, invited to moderate this session. Today we have two speakers. The first one will be Dr. Arianne Reis. Dr. Reis works at Western Sydney University. She started her career as a physical educator and a coach in low-income communities in Rio, Brazil. Now her current research focuses on how physically active leisure pursuits, such as doing sport and physical activities, and also outdoor sports, can promote healthy living, environmental awareness, and social justice. And Dr. Reis has also developed a particular interest in mental health literacy, and suicide prevention. Without further ado, I'll give the floor to Dr. Reis. Let us welcome her. Go virtually applause.
Thank you. First of all, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. Is a real pleasure and honor to be here and talking to you all and presenting a little bit of my work. Is it okay if I share my screen and use some slides?
Yeah. Yes, please do that.
Yeah, so I'll do that. So just bring something up here. So before I start, here in Australia, we do something that we call Acknowledgement of Country. So this is acknowledging the traditional owners of what we call the traditional owners of these lands, who are the Aboriginal Australians. So I'd like to acknowledge the peoples of the WLO Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land on which I'm currently sitting here in the Illawarra region of New South Wales, Australia. I'd also like to pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So as you already know, my name is Arianne Reis, and I'm a senior lecturer in leisure and recreation studies at Western Sydney University. And I'll be talking today about leisure, health and human rights. So to talk about leisure, health and human rights, we must first talk about leisure and social justice. At least this is sort of where I come from in this space of human rights and leisure. And why is that? Because we need to acknowledge that there are still some very important barriers in society today to equal opportunities for leisure. And I'm sure you all know that. And that at the same time, leisure is a very important tool that we can use for creating equality of opportunity for all. As you all know, leisure engagement can lead to improved well-being and can create opportunities for democratic and civic engagement, including through the right to protest and using sport as a platform for political change. Leisure is, after all, a right rather than a privilege, and this is the line of work that I concentrate a lot on, this idea that trying to change a little bit this perspective that that we often have in Western societies of leisure being a privilege and not a right of all peoples. So talking about rights, I couldn't go on without making mention to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was published in 1948, as most of you will know, and it set out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected. It articulates the rights and freedoms to which every one of us is equally entitled. And most of you will know this, that the Declaration of Human Rights indisputably recognizes the significance of leisure, including the significance of leisure to all human beings in Article 24, where it states, as you can see there, that everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. So most countries have enacted domestic constitutional measures and laws to ensure conformity with these international obligations, although this varies from country to country, and how countries actually enact those laws or ensure that these laws are being followed obviously differs tremendously. Basically, human rights are based on 4 simple principles: freedom, dignity, respect, and equality. And so again, this is what I try to base a lot of my work on, is this idea that we need to ensure that our participants in research projects, our students who are going to be future professionals working with communities, understand the rights of people to freedom, to dignity, to respect, and equality. And a lot of that comes also becomes very important when you're working with, particularly with marginalized groups. So say these are the principles of inclusive leisure services, or that we advocate that leisure services should use these principles of self-determination, self-advocacy, integration, and normalization for all, so that we can achieve the human rights that and those principles of human rights that I mentioned before. So as I mentioned before, I think it's really important to highlight that while we're talking about human rights, the difference between approaching it from an equality, an equity, and a social justice perspective. And I come, as I mentioned at the start, from more from a social justice perspective. So you probably have seen this image before. It's goes around every now and again, Facebook and other social media and things like that. Here we have an attempt at addressing an issue that is very leisure related, by the way, which is great, and that uses a social equality framework. So the assumption that is made here is that everyone benefits from the same kind of support, and therefore we give them equal treatment. However, as the image clearly shows, that's not always a good approach. So an equity, a social equity perspective, on the other hand, looks at individual needs and tries to support them, you know, the individuals in their differences. And this is, you know, used a lot with the concept of affirmative action, and it does help to produce equity. Now, a social justice perspective is more interested in going a bit deeper and trying to address more the systemic barriers that create the issues and the differences. So you can see here, it's about removing those barriers or trying to address those barriers, and by addressing them, the support or accommodation is no longer needed because the barriers have been removed. So you don't need the tools and trying to create other ways of creating equity because the barriers have been removed. Now, this is certainly the hardest, but also the most effective way of achieving a more socially just society. So why is it important to talk about human rights when we're studying leisure or working with leisure? Research has repeatedly shown that a human rights approach can lead to improved outcome and services for all people, whether they have a disability, as in this case here, or not. So it's the right thing to do. In most countries, it's a legal obligation. It drives change. And I said it's better for everyone. And then you might ask, but why is it better for everyone? I can climb these stairs with no problem. You know, so making that a ramp is not going to make a difference for me. Well, but you might have a friend who you want to bring to the exhibition, this exhibition here with you, who is in a wheelchair, or you, your mum might be in a wheelchair, or you might have someone in your family with a different ability or disability. So obviously it has a flow-on effect, that it's beyond just the individual. I'm not sure how far and wide this saying has gone, but here in Australia is very common to hear nothing about us without us. So this is an old political slogan that has regained interest and use in recent times. And it's now widely used by marginalized groups to indicate that no policy that affects them should be developed without their full involvement. And what this means is that anything that is about a person with disability, for instance, or someone from a gender diverse, with a gender diverse identity, or whatever their difference may be from what we call the norm, should involve that individual or their representative to guide decision making and identify the chosen outcomes to achieve their hopes, their dreams, their wishes, their aspiration. So of course, I'm sure all of you here will agree with me that people with a disability or anyone have the right to participate in the community and have their own individual autonomy. But there are certainly many, many challenges still for full involvement. Again, I don't think I need to be here preaching to the converted, but you know that leisure participation is dependent on us being able to negotiate a hierarchy of structural, interpersonal, and intrapersonal constraints. So how should we apply human rights in our roles, working in leisure, be it in the leisure services industry, being in education, being in research? I guess three very simple steps, the 3 R's. You start with you recognize the needs of individuals, their differences and their rights. Then reflect on what can be done to assist them, what sort of adaptations might be needed, how you can help as a professional or simply as a citizen, and then request support if you cannot implement the change yourself. If you are in a professional role, then discuss with your supervisor, make sure to follow up. So these are very simple ways that we can support our community and ensure that we are striving for a social justice approach to improve our societies. So how have I applied or engaged with leisure and human rights in my own work as a researcher? So this was all a bit of an intro as opposed to the idea of leisure and human rights. And I have been looking at health in particular for the past few years, because I am in the School of Health Science. I have been for the past five years. So I've become more and more interested in the health aspects of leisure, but and particularly I have been working, as Lucien mentioned before, in the space of mental health and well-being, suicide prevention, and others. Now, this work that I'll talk a little bit about is some work that I started probably almost 10 years ago, and that it's still ongoing and has produced, we have produced a few articles and a few projects and various projects around that. And it's a thing that I'm still very much interested in. And it started to, you know, looking only at leisure spaces, and it's now looking at leisure spaces in this context of health and mental health as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So just to give you a bit of a theoretical context, if I may, for those of you who are not familiar with some of this language, a space as a theoretical concept, it's this idea that the space we inhabit helps shape our perceptions of society, of ourselves, and our values. So really an important part of our identity. Another thing related to space is that the physical environment in which we live influence our leisure habits, and in our particular case, we were interested also very much on physical activity, so leisure and physical activity habits. So the environment may be conducive to or not to leisure engagement. And research has frequently shown that low socioeconomic communities have less leisure spaces, and the leisure spaces that they have are usually of poorer quality. As I briefly mentioned before, some of you joined, I'm originally from Brazil. I have been away from Brazil for probably around 15 years now. And I was in New Zealand first and now in Australia, but I still do a bit of work in Brazil, and I'm very interested in some of the issues that happening and have been happening there. And don't ask me about COVID in Brazil, because it's a big, terrible story at the moment, as you all know. Anyway, going back here, so this work was largely done in Brazil. We are now doing some of this work here in Australia. It's very different because obviously the social justice issues are very different from country to country. So one other theoretical aspect that we looked into when we were doing this work, or something trying to explain or understand this idea of leisure spaces and engagement in, well, of spaces and leisure, was this concept of geographies of exclusion. And this is a concept that Sibley, or a term that Sibley coined, but it's very much based on the work of David Harvey, quite well-known human geographer, who is very much a Marxist and bases his work very heavily on Marx and Engels' work. So it looks at the social spatial issues that reinforce exclusion, particularly in modern capitalist society. So it's how the spaces we inhabit, going back to the idea of spaces, how they very frequently reinforce and perpetuate exclusion in society. So we were interested to look at how do leisure spaces then fit in this, And research in this area of geographies of exclusion has usually looked at spaces which are designed to exclude. So David Harvey famously talks about shopping malls and how they are very much designed to exclude the poor, exclude the deviant youth. So you know, you can't rollerblade or have your skateboard in a shopping mall, and the lights and the way that shopping malls are constructed, they built, they are designed to exclude. But less research has focused on the development of spaces within poor communities that actually reinforce their marginality and therefore reinforce their exclusion. So so this is what we were trying to look into. So these are some pictures from our field work, and as I said, there's a series of projects looking at leisure, physical activity, participation, and social justice. We did quite a lot of field work, and we engaged, we had in our research team members of some of these communities working with us, and these communities were in Rio, in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, and the infamous favelas. I'm sure lots of you have heard of, and we were looking at public spaces of that are usually designed for leisure. So in Brazil we call them praças. So they're like urban parks. But you see some pictures, and it doesn't really resemble a park as an Australian would think of it. I'm not sure. We have people from all different parts of the world here with us today, so it might be a bit different, but some of you might recognize or relate a little bit more with some of these pictures. Anyway, so we did both qualitative and quantitative data collection throughout the years, and we've done focus groups, formal and informal interviews with, as you can see, we took a lot of photographs, we had diaries, people from the community working with us, and we also collected a lot of quantitative data. And I'm not going to go through results of particular projects or anything like that, but just you know, just give you one idea of this body of work that we have been working on. And this is a picture of one of these spaces. And what I love about this picture is how, and we talk about this in some of our work, how some of these spaces or the equipments that are there for leisure, this is a bit like a monkey bar that, you know, the kids can play on, and how members of the community actually repurpose that space or that equipment. And this, one of the members of the community there was telling us that, oh, we don't have, and we saw that in a lot of different areas as well, oh, we don't have space, the houses are very, very tiny there. And they, you know, it was talking about how they don't have space in their houses to hang the washing or whatever it is, and so they're repurposing these spaces. Because how am I going for time? Do I have what, another 5 minutes? Or Lucien, yeah, another 5. Lucien, you're on mute, so I can.
Yes, I think you have.
Sorry, I didn't check the time limit with
I think I started
Nicholas,
at 10.
I think we don't want to waste the time of the others. That's why we limited to 30 minutes. But
Okay.
of course, you have this 5 minutes yet.
Yeah.
If
okay,
Jane, you agree with that? Jane? Okay, so Jane agrees on that. And
yeah.
it's very enthusiastic. We are listening to your presentation. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. So yeah, so this is one of the images, and then this is a bit sad because, as you can see, there are lots of litter and debris, and that shouldn't be there in these spaces. And here, lots of litter and really poorly maintained spaces in this very in this community that needs a lot of resources. And here, very much lack of maintenance of these spaces and the equipment. This is another one that was quite interesting. These kids were basically this was supposed to have a praça there, an open space there, but it had been under reconstruction for a long time, and the kids again just reappropriated the space and were playing with the building debris and the building equipment material there, which is quite risky, obviously, for the kids, but that's the reality. So just in general, some of the findings that we have been looking at for the past few years, as I mentioned, that these communities are very are quite violent in terms of just because of a lot of poverty. And I'm sure you've heard about Brazil and the gangs and the drug gangs, and these communities are quite violent. And interestingly, homicide rates in the vicinity of public spaces did not contribute to people using less these spaces. And one of the things that we argue is that there's a normalization of violence in these communities, which is very worrying and sad. Also, we as I mentioned, we had quantitative data, and so 88% of participants had very low or no physical activity engagement during their leisure time. I talked a little bit about the subversion of determined purposes and spaces, lack of government presence, football dominance, because that's Brazil after all. So and we found that there was this reinforcement of exclusion through this marginality. So I'll just very briefly to finish off, just tell you about a couple of projects that I'm working on at the moment. These are some wonderful women, refugees, resettled here in Australia, and looking at leisure beyond the physical activity and sport that we frequently focus. And this is a project around cooking and social connection through this space of cooking, this moment of leisure, and looking at mental health through leisure, and a project that we are working on at the moment. And this is one of the quotes from one of the participants, that it's quite powerful, talking about, you know, it paralyzes them, all the hurt and trauma that refugees go through, that they can't do anything, they can think of play or any leisure because of all that trauma, even though they're now safe and well here, but they're still connected with their home countries. And this, we have recently published a paper on this vocabulary for recreation that one of our participants talked about, that they lack this vocabulary for recreation because life has been so tough and difficult for them. And just the last slide here, we're starting to do some work with older prisoners in a jail here in Sydney, and looking at the right to leisure for prisoners and what that means. So this is where my work has gone, and this is what I can share with you today about leisure, human rights and health, and looking forward to talking to you more about it, getting any questions that you may have, or moving straight on to Jane, I'm not sure.
Well, Thank you very much. Shall we, do other listeners, the audience have questions for Reis? Or do you want to save up the questions for later after Jen's presentation? How do we do this, Nicholas?
Now I have a question.
There you go.
Arianne. Okay, Arianne, congratulations, and you make us enthusiastic, and we need to write an article for our country as well. So I wish to cooperate with you because we have also some, not just some, but a poverty in our country. And we used to work with Gypsy population, which is a unique population.
Yeah.
And, the biggest problem is if they understand the poor people about their rights in Australia or in Brazil. What is your opinion? So is there any kind of office which is dealing with that or not?
Right to leisure in particular? Yeah, no, not at all. Not in Australia, not in Brazil. We, as I mentioned, I think, and I talk to my students a lot about this, we have this idea, this association of leisure as a privilege, as something that, you know, it's, you do, if you work very hard and you have some time, you can then have some leisure, but the priority of living is work, and everything is around work. And leisure is that residual time that if you are good enough and wealthy enough, you can afford and you have the privilege to have. And so there isn't a full acknowledgement. There is around physical activity, as you know, more and more. So we do have policies, particularly here in Australia, not so much in Brazil, but still some in Brazil, but policies and health promotion campaigns and doctors focusing on, yes, people need physical activity, but leisure, not as much. I think COVID has been really good for that. COVID has highlighted our need for leisure, our need to connect, to have joy in our lives, but still very much underrated, I say.
Thank you. I think, listen, we can continue with Jane, and at the end, we can continue the discussions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Lenny, can you wait?
I have a question.
Yeah, but can you wait with the question? First, listen to Dr. Zhou.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Lenny. We all wait. And at the meantime, we can think about more questions later on. So now,
Lily also had a question, so we'll come back to both of them at the end. Thank you again, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, make sure you don't leave early. And now we move on to our second presenter, Professor Lijun Zhou. She's my current supervisor at Zhejiang University. Professor Zhou is a full professor at Zhejiang University in China. She's also the Deputy Dean of College of Education. She teaches the courses of sport management and sport sociology for undergraduate students. And she also teaches theory and practice of leisure for master and doctoral students. And mainly she has 4 areas of research, which 4 we can listen to her to expand later. And in recent 5 years, Dr. Zhou has been the chief leader of the national, provincial, and municipal governmental research projects on sports and leisure programming. Some of her research findings and outcomes were adopted by by the local governments to use, to practice. So let's welcome Dr. Zhou.
Hi, everyone. Dear Professor Peterson, so glad to meet you online. And First, I'd like to thank your World Leisure Organization and Miklos to build this platform to communicate with each other. And thank you, Alina, for your wonderful presentation. So today, I'd like to share my presentation with all of you. Miklos, maybe 1 month ago, Miklos asked me to communicate what I'm doing now and my job and my career. So maybe my presentation is not so academic as Arena, but anyway, yeah, we'd like to communicate. Now, I'd like to share my Does it work?
Yes, now.
Oh, okay. So my title is, the presentation title is Leisure in China, Research Experience Perspectives. So there are 3 parts. First, I will quick introduce my university and also World Leisure Center of Excellence at Zhejiang University and my responsibilities and my research. So first, I'd like to introduce my university. There are 7 campuses in Zhejiang University, and 5 campuses of Zhejiang University is in Hangzhou, where I live. Yeah, Hangzhou. So maybe some of you have never been to China. So Hangzhou is about 170 kilometers away from Shanghai. Yes. So we are 5 campuses in Hangzhou and 2 campuses out of Hangzhou. So now we have 7 campuses. And Zhejiang University has a long history. It originated in 1897. So the formal of Zhejiang University called Qiusi Academy, then developed into 4 universities, that is Zhejiang University, Hangzhou University, Zhejiang Medical University, and also Hangzhou Agricultural University. And in 1998, 4 universities merged into current Zhejiang University. So we called it New Zhejiang University. And in 2017, Zhejiang University celebrated the 120th anniversary. And there's some figures to tell what Zhejiang University is. It is number 3 in China, and QS Asian University ranks in 2021. It listed number 5 in Asia. And QS World University Rankings, it is 53 in the world. And also it is one member of China, the best 9 university in China. So maybe you have some idea of the Zhejiang University. There are 7 faculties, 37 colleges and schools, 120 undergraduate programs, 152 advanced degree programs. So there are more than 3,800 academic faculty members and more than 54,000 students, including 7,000 international students. And there are 5 university libraries, 7 affiliated hospitals, and 1 museum of art and archaeology. And Zhejiang University have built 180 plus partner universities in 6 continents and 37 double degree programs with the foreign universities, 40 plus joint research laboratories with our partners, and 10 plus joint research centers with international enterprises, and also build a relationship with 6 international associations and alliances, include World Leisure Organization. And my college is a College of Education. So I will have a quick introduce. Yes. So my college originated in 1897 too. And now we have 85 faculty members, among them 29 professors and 35 associate professors. And also we have 40 plus guest professors and adjunct professors. There are 779 full-time students. So 182 doctoral students, 136 master students, and also 461 undergraduate students. And also there are 512 part-time master students. And there are 5 academic organizations, that is Department of Education, Sport Science, Curriculum and Learning Sciences, and also Institute of Educational Leadership and Policy, and the Teaching and the Research section of Military Affairs. And we have 5 bachelor's programs, 13 master's programs, and 11 doctoral programs. And also we have 14 research institutes, 9 in education and 5 in sports science. So in my college, we have built relationship with more than 20 countries in 4 continents and more than 30 universities. Yeah, so faculty and students mobility into foreign countries, and we organize activities in summer, in winter, and also during the semesters. And in my college, we have global outreach. There are 5 global outreach, and 4 related to UNESCO, and 1 related to World Leisure Organization. So also I'd like to introduce World Leisure Center of Excellence, because we'd like to recruit the students in foreign countries and also the professors in other countries. So the World Leisure Center of Excellence at Zhejiang University officially established in November 2018. And specialized in sports, leisure, and health and leisure education. So Christina went to World Leisure Center of Excellence to give some speeches. So these pictures shows. And also World Leisure Center of Excellence at Zhejiang University. There was an international forum in 2019. So International Leisure and Sport Forum, Miklos also made a speech there. And we have the field school program. In 2016, 2 students attending field school program in Durban. And in 2018, 1 student attending field school program in São Paulo. And also in 2019, leisure experience research opportunity. There are 5 students at from Zhejiang University attended this program. And they published a paper with other students in World Leisure Journal. Yes. So the name is Learning from Experience in Hangzhou, World Leisure Center of Excellence Leisure Experience Research Opportunity. And also student internship in 2019, 2 students did internship and a secretary of a World Leisure Organization. And this year, 2 students are taking online internship at World Leisure Organization. So the second part, I'd like to introduce what I'm doing. Yes. So just as the reason introduced, now I undertake some administrative responsibilities, yes, and also as a director of World Leisure Center of Excellence at Zhou University, and also director of National Sports Industry Research Center at Zhou University. So from these responsibilities, you can know what I'm doing and my job is and my research. Yes, so my research is related to sport industry and also leisure. My research interest is cross-cultural analysis on leisure sport behavior, outdoor sports, sport tourism, theory and practice on leisure programming. So this is my research interest and what I'm doing in these years. These are my master students and my PhD students, which who I'm supervised now. So you can see all these students together. Last week, they just celebrate my birthday. Yeah. My course is for undergraduate students. I taught sports management, special English for sports sociology. For graduates, I taught sports sociology. For doctoral students, I taught theory and practice of leisure. So this is what I'm undertaking social responsibilities. Yes, and this is 1 week ago, I attended a World Leisure Congress at Pinggu, Beijing. Yes, so, and sometimes I will attend the social activities organized by the China's General Administration of Sport and do some field study. You can see these pictures. Yes, and also I will just attend the TV program, the televised, yeah, do some programs. And also I went to a neighborhood province as a think tank expert to guide them how to set up leisure programs and leisure activities. Yes, and also attended some academic salon. Yeah. So a personal background, yes. So I am as a visiting professor at the University of Northern Iowa, and also a visiting professor at University College Dublin, Ireland. So usually, according to the some social background or the leisure development in China, so I'd like to use 5 keywords to show the characteristics of leisure in China. First, leisure policy, leisure lifestyle, leisure activities, leisure facilities, and leisure intelligence. So for the leisure policy, so in the past 5 years, Chinese government published more than 100 policies to push the leisure development. For example, outline of national leisure and tourism, guidance of accelerating the development of fitness and leisure industry, guidance on strengthening the development of sports tourism, guidance on accelerating the development of tourism, and so on. So I can say that every month there will be a policy to publish related to sport, tourism, leisure, culture. So this means that leisure development in China is highly emphasized. And the holiday system reform. So in addition to the 3 golden weeks of Spring Festival, Labor Day, so the next week will be the Labor Day of China. We have 5 days off and a national holiday. The number of holidays in a year has reached 114 in China. This means that we have 114 days to rest. So holiday induce the consumption of leisure, tourism, and sport, and drive the consumption of related industries such as transportation, accommodation, and finance. So the holiday system reform promotes the growth of leisure economy. And the change of consumption pattern, pay attention to leisure. So nowadays on weekends, especially weekends now in Hangzhou in China, it is spring. So everywhere you can see the flower in blossom. So people will go to campground to camp, yes, in different areas. So, and also you can see the marathon in China. So in spring and in autumn, every weekend, there will several marathon carried out in China. There's some figures to tell you what marathon in China. In 2017, there were 1,110 marathons in China. And in 2019, you can see 1,828. And in COVID-19, yes, so there's some influence, maybe some influence last year, but this year it is much better. So on weekends, maybe in my province is Zhejiang province. So on weekends in this month, usually 3 or 4 marathons were carried out in my province. So marathon has some economic effect, promotes the economic growth of tourism destinations, increase the government's fiscal revenue, promote the development of related industries, and provide employment opportunities. And also their social and cultural effect. And also their leisure activities. So you can see World Leisure events in China. Since 2006, World Leisure Expo and Forum in Hangzhou. From 2019, there will be 2 years in Hangzhou. And the World Leisure Games, you can say Reis, Qingdao, 2015 and 2019. World Leisure Congress 2016 in Hangzhou and 2021 in Pinggu. And the World Leisure Festival will be in Shaoxing in China this year too. And besides the World Leisure events in China, also there are some national and provincial leisure activities. You can say a hiking expo, flying expo, auto camping expo, and Zhejiang Sports Leisure Tourism Festival, Zhejiang Outdoor Games, and so on. You can see Miklos went to China to attend the activities. And nowadays, Chinese people, they love movie, tourism, drama, sport, show, exhibition. So these are main leisure activities in China. And also the leisure facilities were improved in the past years. You can say national trail system, and the government improves infrastructure and social capital actively invests. So this is a sport town, and this is a skiing resort, and some famous enterprise invests it. So according to this background, my research directions is from these 4 aspects: cross-cultural analysis on regional sport behavior, because I'd like to comparing the regional sport behavior with from the east to west, and outdoor sports. And in recent 2 years, I focus on outdoor sports, especially in outdoor sports industry. And in 2019, I submit a report to develop outdoor sports industry policy to our minister, a prime minister, and it was praised by prime minister. And this year, I did several grants regarding to outdoor sports industry policy. Yes, so I cooperated with the Ministry of Education and the Sports Administration Bureau, and also other departments to do the outdoor sports industry, and also the sport tourism and the theory and the practice on regional program. This direction, my group is to help the local government to set up the regional program. Yes, and also we made a very social reaction. Yes. So from the cross-cultural analysis on regional sports behavior, I'd like to share my publication in 2014. Yes, it was published in Research Quarterly for Exercise and Sports. The title is "Music is not our enemy, but noise should be regulated. Thoughts on cheating, conflicts related to Dharma square dance in China." Because in recent years, people are paying more attention to the fitness. So Dharma square dance is very popular in China. After dinner, you can see some old people just get together at the square to dance, but it makes a lot of noise. So there's some conflict. So I'd like to share these issues with with colleagues. So this is what I'm published in. Yeah. And the other is about the agenda and the preference, the difference of bicycle routes, parking interaction signals, and bicycle type. Professional middle class preference in Hangzhou, China. And this paper is published in a Journal of Transport and Health. Because as you know, in China, a lot of people, they are riding bicycles. Yes, and also in the previous years, just as my appearance, maybe the bicycle is just for transportation. But for the young generation nowadays, the bicycle is just for just to do exercise, you know. So this is also my research interest maybe in 3 or 5 years ago, yes. And also there's another, the paper is a cultural confrontation, Western impacts on female cultural students' leisure opportunities in Taiwan and China, social indicators research in 2015. Yes, and also we made a comparison about it because Taiwan and mainland China, we are all Chinese, but there's some difference about the leisure opportunities. So we made a comparison. And for outdoor sports, there's also a journal, a paper published Journal of Leisure Research last year, an exploratory study of motives for participation in extreme sports and physical activity. And because for outdoor sports, especially extreme sports, more and more popular for young people. So we'd like to explore the motives. So this we just published, yes. And we used the interview for 14 adults who participated in extreme sports as serious leisure pursuits. And we identified 9 general dimensions. 7 were consistent with participation motives in traditional sports, and 2 were new to extreme sports, that is vertical and catch races. And these are our main findings. And for theory and practice on leisure programming, this is the programs that I'm doing for the local governments. Yeah, mainly for the local governments. And also I got 2 big funding. The first one is Sports Leisure Project Planning Innovation, Chinese Experience by National Philosophy and Science Fund China. This is the top level of funding in China. And last year I got it. And this one, regional development of leisure sports in China from the perspective of culture and anthropology and physical activity. And this is 5 years ago, yes. And this is the auto sports development planning at a different level, yes. And sponsored by General Administration of Sports, also the local sport bureau and so on. So I welcome all of you who are interested in outdoor sports. Yes, we can join together to do the leisure programming for the government, for Chinese government, yes. And also in 2017, Chinese are carried out to organize or develop the sport leisure town. Yes, so I also doing the research of sport leisure town development planning. So this is the some sport leisure town that my research group helped the local government to do. So you can see this is the in Tonglu, Hecheng sport leisure town. It is famous for skiing and also for the water sports. And this is the you can see for automobile race sport town, and this is for the climbing. Yeah, it is famous for climbing. So there are several different type of sport leisure town. Yes. So I'm not sure my time is enough or not enough. So yeah, I'd like to leave some questions for you all. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Zhou. Shall we go into the question and Q&A time? Because I think a lot of listeners are waiting and expecting for this moment. Who will be the first one? Lenny, is it?
Yeah, just
yes, please.
Have a question for Arianne. I also asked her about what is based on her research. How do you increase the public area in the poor community? Because on her slide, that she said that the poor community is being excluded. I would like to address that it's a little bit similar to Cambodia, that we have a lot of, one people, one house, so we use a lot of space. So mostly people have only house and road, so there is no park or green area for children to play. So how do we can increase the public area in the poor community, because I would like to know, and I would like to, so I can apply in my country for area.
Yeah, I
And
think
for Jan too, I have for Jan about the, may I ask about what does the sport tourism situation in China? Does mostly the sport event or sport event held in the mostly in the city or the countryside? I'm really interested. Yeah, and so I would like to know about the sport tourism situation in China, the whole environment. Yes, thank you.
thanks. Should I go first and then?
Yeah.
Yeah, so very briefly, I think the most powerful thing is to bring it to public attention. So if you're able to do some research that can accurately measure or assess and show that poor communities have less leisure spaces, public spaces, access to them, then the high income communities, and bring that to policymakers' attention. And if that fails, bring it to media attention so that you get some public discussion about it. Then that's usually when things happen. But firstly, working with local councils, local government organizations that have the power to do something about this is the best strategy. But I think that research is really important so that you can demonstrate with numbers, usually governments like numbers, so that's why I tend to always do some quantitative research as well as the qualitative, because for policy change, numbers can be quite powerful. So there are some ways of measuring these, and we can talk about that, and showing how these communities are being deprived and marginalized of their right to have these spaces. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, so can I repeat your question? You said that can I introduce the sport tourism development in China? That's a question?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, it is really a good question. I can tell you a story. One of my doctoral students, Reis, Zhou, yeah, and she is very actively participate any academic activities organized by a religious organization. But today she is absent. Why? Because this afternoon, because here it is almost evening, this afternoon, she went to Tibet to bicycling. So this is a sport tourism. And he asked me to let him have almost 1 month to be free, because she will come back to Zhejiang University at the end of next month. She will have almost 30 days to bicycling in Tibet, because Tibet, there's the environment is very challenging for bicyclists. And also the scenic spot is also very attractive. So that is a sport tourism. So this year, the sport tourism is developed very well in China, because the scenic spot losing attractiveness for the tourists, and people, they like to stay and also to develop the industry. So in some scenic spot, Chinese government, they set up several experience programs such as camping, climbing, and also other leisure activities to induce the sport tourism industry. Yes, so maybe in 10 years ago, if you go to a Great Wall, some mountains, you also experience the scenery, beautiful scenery. But now, besides to experience the beautiful scenery, people, they'd like to experience some activities in so beautiful environment, especially some physical activities such as camping or such as do some sports. Yes, so it is really good. Yes, and my group, one of our research direction is also about sport tourism. Yes, and we also published some articles in this kind of research direction. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who else has questions? No one? Then I will ask. I have two-part questions and also, well, before asking that, let me give a background of the question. So in China, these days work are very intense. There's a term called 996, means the younger generation or middle-aged people, they start working at 9 a.m., finish at 9 p.m., 6 days in a week. So we call it 996. In this situation, I wonder those people can be regarded as marginal groups. Well, they do earn money, but they may lack the time for leisure. And in that case, how leisure can be seen as a right for them and use leisure to improve their, well, social well-being. For me, for those people, I see leisure may be privileged for them, and rather than leisure, they may just want to rest. So that's the first part of the question for Arianne. And then also for Jen. So how do you see this contrast between the very intense work pattern and the very well-developed leisure in China, and how can we, or maybe the government can reconcile and do something about this? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very important question, and one that I think we have all been grappling with for some time now, because you know, it's not only in China, in places like Brazil, you would have a lot of the, particularly the lower income groups, working 2 shifts a day to be able to make ends meet, and therefore, you know, a lot of the work around health promotion and physical activity asks, but why? People know that doing physical activity is important. Why don't they just do it? And you go, like, if you're working, like you were just saying, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., you get home, you want to rest, you don't want to exercise. And that's been a problem, and it's a societal problem rather than an individual problem. I think as individuals, we might recognize that we need leisure, and that we and even maybe have the awareness that we should have the right to leisure. But if society, and obviously part of it is the government and policies, do not facilitate that and do not enable us to understand leisure as a fundamental part of being humans and surviving and thriving, not only surviving but thriving as human beings, then we'll increasingly have more and more health problems, as we're seeing. not only non-communicable diseases have been increasing, but also depression, anxiety, and these are very much a reflection of a very disturbed world and a very fatigued world as well, because we're not recognizing not only the right to rest, but the right to leisure. So it is a very tricky one, and I think it's beyond the individual. It is really something that needs to happen at a societal level to really have important change. And that goes back to my talk about social justice. It's really removing those barriers rather than just saying to the individual, oh, here's a box so that you can go a little bit higher and watch the game over the fence. So yeah, not an answer, but
it is. It's basically fundamentally it's need to shape the understanding of leisure, not to see it as privilege, but really a human right, like you said. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think an important thing is this idea that thriving as humans and personal development as humans that is achieved through leisure, and that without leisure, it's really hard for us to be able to thrive.
Thank you.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Sorry, I have the second part of question waiting for Jen to answer. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so Lucien asked me a question. This is the question I'm always asking for myself. Yes. So as you know that during the day, I have to manage several things. For example, to do administration work, to have classes, and at night, I worked very late, deep into night, because I'd like to do research. I'd like to write paper. So early in the morning, I have to got up to the class, you know. So there's less time to do a leisure, to enjoy leisure. And on the other hand, I'm a leisure expert professor to study leisure. So this is a conflict. And my students and also my colleagues, sometimes they will ask me, you are so busy and you advocate leisure, but when and where to leisure for yourself? Yeah, this is a good question. But on the other hand, I think that leisure study, I work so hard to do leisure studies, make and advocate leisure life as leisure will become a lifestyle. Sometimes sacrifice myself, maybe others, they can have more leisure time. Oh, of course, this is a joke, yes. So this is a conflict. And nowadays, for the Chinese government, Lucien asked if there's any suggestions for Chinese people because they work 9 to 9. But on the other hand, this is only a small portion of population, not all the large population. This is also a small portion of it. Most of people, they, for example, they go to work at 9 o'clock and then 5 p.m. they will go to go home in China. Usually they do like that. But for some professors or some high leader in big enterprises, they are busy. But there's a new phenomenon in China. For example, maybe most of you know that Alibaba, because the company of Alibaba located in Hangzhou. Do you know Alibaba company?
It's
yes.
Internet company.
Yeah. Alibaba.
Like Amazon, those
things. And this company and the staff works very late, deep late in night. So after their work, they will go to the fitness room midnight because so these days in China, the night economy was produced for some, for some people who worked very late into night, just to attract people because they have some fitness environment. Then people will go to work after work. On the other hand, this means that we should improve our work efficiency. Some people, they can manage work well, and also they can manage their physical activity participation. So Lucy just asked me this question, and I will maybe in the following times, I should manage my time more efficiently. Work and physical activity participation, and to enjoy leisure. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Do we have other questions? Seize the opportunity. Yes.
Yeah,
Nicholas.
I have one for Arianne and one for
Oh, yeah.
Jane. Okay, for Arianne, you cited some of the activities you did on leisure, and then you research on it. So those, what I'd like to know is, those activities on the field, is it based on what you are going to research on, or the activities were there and then you conducted the research? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't understand. So,
all right. You mentioned some of the activities, leisure activities, which you all studied, right, on the field.
Some activities like the data collection activities, you mean, or the physical activities?
Yeah, the field activities. And then from there, you did the research. So was the research, was the physical activities planned, and then you all go to the field to do the research? Or the activities was created for the research?
No, the activities were not created for the research. So it was all about what people were doing. So the case that I mentioned at the end of the program that we did with refugee women, that wasn't around physical activity. We created that program for them. But the project in Rio in Brazil with the favelas was about what they did. So we interviewed people. We did surveys across the community, hundreds and hundreds of surveys, asking people what were the activities that they did and what were the spaces that they were using. We had a series of different projects, so each one of them focusing on a different aspect, but in none of them we created a program. They were all either things that people did by themselves as voluntary, or were we did some projects in some community spaces where activities were happening there, and we talked to people there, but none of it was us as researchers creating the interventions. They were all what people were already doing.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question for Jane. In your talk, you show a lot of leisure being promoted in your country, especially leisure sports and so on. China seems to in recent years, I mean, China seems to excel in sports in many areas. So does all these leisure activities contribute to the sporting excellence in China?
Thank you for your question. So I'd like to confirm your question. You mean that the sport leisure activities is accelerating what? Sport excellence?
Okay, all these leisure sports activities, which you all seem to be developing in your country, does it contribute to the sporting excellence and all the winnings in elite sports?
It is a contribute to sport excellence, you know. You mentioned sport excellence.
Yeah, I mean in elite sports, like
Elite
in
sport.
Olympic Games, yeah,
Elite
that,
sport.
yeah, yeah. So does all these activities, leisure sports and so on, does it contribute to the culture to develop sporting excellence for China to excel in sports?
Okay, okay. I know your question. Maybe you folks that because in the past Chinese pay attention to the elite sport, yes. But in recent years, there's some sport reform. So Chinese government, on the other hand, they emphasize on elite sport. On the other hand, they are also pay attention to the mass sport. I mean, mass sport, you know.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Mass sport. So Chinese government published several policies to carry out the mass sport, from the financial support and also the facilities, and also published some leisure time, because people have more free time to participate some sport tourism. And also for the the elite sport, I think that the elite sport also contribute to the leisure sport, and leisure sport contribute to elite sport too. For example, if there's some professional or some games, for example, Olympic Games, and also the Asian Games in China, and more people, they will participate into, or just be the audience to watch the sport games in China. And this is the leisure activity for them. And also they will pay to buy the tickets to watch the games. And also they have the sport idea to support the elite sport. So I think there's some contributions to the elite sport. And also elite sport just produce the leisure sport industry, the market.
So that means it works both ways, two ways, to and fro.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, that means it works both ways, to and fro. It works both ways. What I mean is elite leisure sports contribute to elite sport. Elite sports also contribute to leisure sport. Yeah. So it works in both directions, complement each other.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.